Hey Channel Insiders, welcome back to Channel Insider Partner POV, your source for untapped opportunities and unfiltered opinions in the IT channel, all to help you make better business decisions. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso. This episode is going to be a crash course in identifying why we may feel stuck in our career journeys and how we can all become high-capacity leaders. My guest today is Aaron Brown, Chief Transformation Officer of True Increase and founder of Burgeon Software. Aaron started his executive coaching business, True Increase, in 2005 and later pivoted to work in the IT channel, but he still saw a need for coaching. So this time, with the help of his business partner, Chris Williams, he decided to become that agent of change once again. Welcome, Aaron.
Hi, Katie. First of all, I'm so grateful to be here and thanks for having me.
Can you start out a little bit by talking about your IT background and ultimately how you got here today?
Although I've served in the technology space, particularly in the mid-market for over a decade, not only do I know a lot of your previous guests and have worked with many of them, for many of your audience or much of your audience, it'll be the first time they've heard of me. I launched my first business in 95. I was 18 years old and I was serving high net worth individuals in Orange County, California. And after about 10 years of that, I was able to parlay that relational equity into serving those same clients in their multi-million dollar businesses. And so I spent about a decade serving 50 multi-million dollar companies in change management and leadership development. And then something odd happened is I felt like it was time to make a change. And I was asked by two of my clients who both own tech companies if I would take on an executive role. And I took one of them up on it. Some of your audience might know the Comtel Group. They've been around for over 30 years. Or they might know them by their newer name when we rebranded them as Tech Trust the last 4 or 5 years. I was there from 2000 as a consultant from 2011, as a VP and president from 2013 to 2022. And frankly, I got frustrated. I got frustrated with not living my life purpose every day. My greatest passion was helping leaders get what they wanted, whether it was personal objectives or business objectives. And so as a sales leader, frankly, I have to confess I was a hack because I didn't really care about whether I got the contract or not. I care about adding value to leaders. So in 2022, at the end of 22, in January 23, when I moved on, I relaunched True Increase. And I also launched Burgeon Software company as a sister company to True Increase. And so what ultimately led to that transformation, I have to confess, was my marriage was on the verge of destruction. After 20 years of marriage and 4 kids, we had been through marriage counseling almost weekly for 20 years and couldn't move the needle. And then in this weird twist of events, the next 5 people I asked in my town who had a network of like 10,000 people and I've lived in for 45 years, I knew everybody. The next 5 people all said the same name when I was sharing with them. I need help. Like, we're on the verge here. And we went in and met him for one session and our marriage was transformed in 30 minutes. His background was neuroscience and my background was a physiologist. So I had this love of human behavior and development. And yet I didn't appreciate neuroscience at that point. After 30 minutes, when he changed our lives dramatically, it's night and day. 4 years later, my wife and I have an amazing marriage. Our children are doing wonderful. 2 months after we met with him, I said, hey, I'm going to go back to coaching eventually. I don't know when. I said, but I'm going to take what I learned from you. I can't help but teach it. And he's like, right on. I said, yeah, but I'm going to take it and we're going to take it to the world and we're going to democratize it. We're going to leverage some technology and software to do that as well, because I believe everybody deserves the right to have access to life-changing tools and not have to be able to pay through the nose for it. So that's what the software allows people to do, is any individual can go spend $10 a month and have the tools at their fingertips. A year and a half later, he's my business partner. January 2023, we rebooted True Increase and Burgeon Software for the first time. After a few calls, I had a dozen clients now working with billion-dollar companies. The first one being the Orlando Magic NBA team and their EVP of technology, Jeff Lutz. And so I was so grateful because I was back to doing what I love, but now empowered with another level of tools and resources. I had the business side and the technology background, But my business partner had the neuroscience, which was a missing component I felt.
Let's talk about what exactly it is that you actually do and what True Increase is meant to do. Could you kind of explain that through a success story for me to give our audience an idea of what exactly it is that you specialize in now and what you love to do every day?
Basically, there's 4 ways that we help organizations right now. And the first is thriving leaders. And so many leaders would just not describe themselves, even if they're highly successful, as thriving. And so we help leaders get to that thriving place. And whether it's because their marriage is falling apart, or whether it's because their department is falling apart, or the business is just not making the leap that they feel they have the potential to make, we help the leaders thrive. Second is cohesive culture. Most organizations struggle culturally. And then the third would be strategic clarity. I find most organizations, even multi-billion-dollar companies, struggle with strategic clarity. And then fourth and finally, performance optimization. Once we're crystal clear on where we're going, like how do we get there in the most optimized way? All of our methodologies for all the different services we provide fold under one umbrella methodology. We call it our ACE methodology. And ACE stands for align or alignment, clarify or clarity, and execute or execution. So alignment, clarity, and execution. And what we find is most leaders, teams, and organizations are struggling with one of those phases at one of those levels. So on our diagram, at the lowest level, you see high capacity leaders. That's our job, is to help high capacity leaders tap into their full potential. And what we find is most individuals and teams and organizations don't need to add more things to the mix. They need to be able to tap into the resources, the full resources they already have. And so I have a typical situation is I have a CEO of this happens to be one of our smaller clients, a $200 million a year organization. And he comes to me and he says, hey, yeah, I want to hire you because I need to do a strategic retreat. We just sold a $1 billion asset, and now they're just a multi-million-dollar company. So now we can be laser beam focused, and we're putting all those resources into this resource. So I want to do a strategic retreat with 2 of my teams and really get clear and really get aligned. And as I started to investigate in the discovery conversation, what we found was he wasn't ready for a strategic retreat. He wasn't ready for his team to align, because if you start in the pyramid at the bottom, he wasn't aligned with himself, with what his role was. He had internal conflict about the role that he was playing, the way he was playing it, where the organization was going. And as the leader, it's hard to align your team. In fact, it's next to impossible to align your team when you yourself are not aligned. And so when a leader comes to me with an organizational disconnect or a team or cultural disconnect, we've got to drop back down to level 1 and make sure that he's aligned. And that works on an individual and a per instance basis. For example, if you want your husband, we've talked about marriage a little bit, you and I off camera. And if you want your husband to be on the same page with you with something, but you have internal conflict about it and haven't resolved that, it's hard to get him on the same page because you're not going to be at a good place to do that. So with him, what we did, we started with one-on-one coaching. And in one session, he had major epiphany of where his conflict was keeping him from leading the team well. And if he's not leading the team well, the team isn't leading the organization well, so they're not executing well. So it's first alignment, then clarify, then execute. What I've seen is high capacity leaders, that's all I work with, they often have enough talent and enough skill that they think about what needs to be done, the result they want to accomplish, and they just start doing it. And the really good ones will stop and really do some thoughtful planning to get clarity. So they'll start at the second stage. So good leaders start somewhere between execution, like they think what they need to do, they execute, or they think what they need to do, then they do some real planning for clarity, then they move to execution. And that will work until it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And then what you have to do is when you start hitting the wall, either personally, interpersonally, on the team or in the organization, when you start hitting that wall, we all hit the ceiling or the wall eventually, you have to step back and go, okay, where's the breakdown? So if you want to fix your team, which most leaders come to me with team issues, then I say, hey, we got to start making sure you're at the right place. We make sure they're aligned, they're clear on what they need to do, and they're executing their plan. Then we move to the team. When the team is aligned and we remove that conflict or that misalignment, they're clear, they can execute. Execution is actually the easiest part. Most organizations will tell you they're oh, we're good at this, we're good at that, we're good at straight, but we struggle with execution. I disagree. In my experience, it's usually not. Execution is actually the easy part. It's getting crystal clear on what you're executing and getting aligned so that you can get crystal clear, because it's hard to get clear if you're not aligned.
It's interesting what you say on the execution part being the easy part. It's everything that leads up to it. In my job, so much of what I do has to do with pre-production before we even get the cameras rolling. So it's really interesting to hear that kind of translate in that realm.
Oh, you're so natural on camera. Like when we talked, when we had our discovery call, I felt like I was already on the podcast. I feel like you should be like a weather forecaster or something. You're just so natural in front of the camera. That is easy for you. You execute really easy. And most high capacity people do. They execute. It's natural. That's why they're high capacity people. It's will only take you so far though. So that's why really successful people, when they get stuck, they're like, I don't know what to do because my talent, my skill, my experience is not getting me there. And you have to go back to basics almost. What I'm interested in is taking people who already are successful and helping them understand what their limiting factors are and how to flip that switch to hyper successful, and to take that success and make sure it proliferates through every part of their life and their work. So for example, there's a slide that I shared with you about the 3 most common challenges that I deal with high capacity leaders. And number 1, far and above the others, is generally influence. Now, when I say influence, there's 3 directions we influence. There's upline, which can be your boss. So if you're a VP and you report to the C level, or if you're a C level, you report to the board. If you're it could be your customers. I would consider those upline because ultimately you kind of answer to them. Then there's parents. There's mentors that are upline. They're on the laterally on the peer level. There's spouses, which, there's a reason 60-something% of marriages and divorce in America right now, right? So they're a peer, that we're a relationship that most people are struggling with, and that impacts your work greatly, whether you recognize it or not. Then there's siblings, there's colleagues, peers, other executives on your team. Finally, there's downline. There's your direct reports. There's your children. A lot of successful leaders who have children and adult children are imploding. And so you've got these 3 directions. You've got upline, downline, you've got laterally to your peers. It doesn't matter if you're successful and influential. Eventually we hit our ceiling. And how we move past our current capacity is much more neurological than it is skills-based. So most leadership development programs and books, they're based on transferring information to you intellectually, but that's not how we actually learn as human beings. Neurologically, we know we learn through experience. And so how do we actually gain that experience without having to spend years of trudgery overcoming something, right, that we're keep hitting our head against the wall? So the second biggest challenge that we see is insufficient execution. And that may be related to lack of influence, or it may be just inability to execute on whatever the task is at hand right now, or whatever the initiative is. And so what I find is high capacity leaders often have executed many very impressive things in their career and their life, but right now they're hitting their head against the wall. And so how do they move past that current level of execution? And then finally, another one extremely common is poor life balance. And so you got people, maybe they're jamming in the influence category and they're jamming in the execution category. They're just killing it. And yet, like me, their marriage is imploding, or their kids are falling apart, or they're struggling with anxiety or stress, or they're not taking care of their personal health, or their personal wealth for that matter. They're a high paid individual and they have been for a long time, but they're not wealth building. So these are areas that what I found is most leaders, high capacity or not, as humans, we struggle with balance. And so I'm not talking about work-life balance in terms of like how many hours you work. I'm talking about making sure that you're keeping all the balls in the air, your physical health, your relational health, your emotional and mental health, your work, your financial. So what I find is most people are good in a couple of those. They're okay in a couple, and they're terrible in another couple. And as high capacity people, what do? We focus on ROI. We go after where we're getting results. And so when we stop getting results somewhere, we hit our head long enough on something, we just kind of start to neglect it and move on to focus on the area where we're getting fed. And that eventually starts to catch up with us.
How can we identify in ourselves that something is wrong if we don't believe it? So how can we know that we have a problem so that we can start addressing it?
Well, first of all, our brain, our subconscious mind is set up to not let us know. So there's neurological clues, there's relational clues, there's organizational clues. So let's start with a few of the neurological clues. Here's some of the obvious ones. You're feeling frustration and anxiety regularly or semi-regularly. This client, they were using a bite guard for, I don't know, a decade or two. And I said, hey, before we're done, you're going to stop using a bite guard at night. And they were like, Aaron, I grind through a bite guard every month, literally annihilate this thick rubber thing by grinding so hard at night. That's a neurological clue that you have anxiety and stress, fear, shame, something that's active in you subconsciously on a regular basis. There's a great best-selling book called The Body Keeps the Score. So if you're a science nerd like me, it's like this thick, you'll love it. But it says the body is dying to give up the truth. So your body's your early warning system and your late warning system. So what I mean by that is when you feel under threat, Katie, if someone were to verbally assault you or physically get in your space and you felt threatened, you'd feel it in your body instantaneously. It happens in a millisecond. So you'd feel anxiety, your chest tighten up, your shoulders, or you'd clench up, your body, it's what we call vasoconstriction. Your body's going to respond chemically by cortisol and adrenaline. So when your heart's racing, like before you go do public speaking, most people, it's one of the most common fears, right? Your heart starts racing. That's your neurology telling you we're under threat. So why can some speakers go talk in front of millions of people and be totally calm and relaxed? Well, because they've relearned that experience neurologically. So number one, you listen to your body. Your body's going to tell you through grinding your teeth at night, through neck tension and pain, through IBS or upset stomach or indigestion, anxiety, physical responses, weight gain, loss of appetite or weight loss, sleeplessness. So there's all these neurological signs and symptoms. Next, let's go to some relational ones. Conflict. Where do you have conflict? So look at your relationships, whether they're personal or professional. Where are you not being totally honest? Where do you not have peace or alignment in your relationships? And I'm not saying every relationship is going to be rainbows and unicorns. What I'm saying is that traditionally, if we are at a good place and we've resolved any stuckness in us neurologically, then we're able to navigate even difficult relationships really well. And we can have peace in the midst of the lack of agreement, right? So when we don't, and we have that consistent relational conflict, usually there's some stuckness there. And that's where we slip into our limbic brain, which subconsciously says, you're under threat here. You're not safe. You're not going to get what your needs met. And therefore, we retract and we devolve intellectually. Organizational, let's look at the last couple signs organizationally. Again, potential signs, you're not growing as an organization. You're not solving long-time problems that have plagued you. You have cultural factions in the organization. There's huge discrepancies between the way different organizations within your organization are functioning or individual performers, right? When great organizations, when they have top performers, they go, okay, what are they doing? Let's duplicate that and help others to duplicate that. So if you have these huge discrepancies, that's a sign or a symptom potentially organizationally that you're not optimized. And so if you as a leader are not solving that, then you're usually stuck somewhere in the process.
That makes a lot of sense. And it helps us to kind of see of where we are in that process to say, maybe I need to reach out for help. So by the time they get to you, Aaron, how does that usually begin? When somebody is exploring, Aaron, I'm thinking I might need your help. I may need a coach. How do we get started? Could you kind of walk me through that process?
What I would say is I'm not here to pitch, True Increase or Aaron Brown or Burgeon Software, my business partner. I'm here to advocate that the more successful you are, the more coaching you need. If you think you've tapped your potential and you're at your capacity as a human being or as a leader or as an executive, don't get a coach. But if you think that you've got more in the tank or you're just not satisfied with the results, I'd say hire a coach. If you're comfortable with it, I would love to take something that you'd like to work on, but I'd like to just walk you through a simple process.
Oh boy. Not so fast. Join me again Tuesday for part 2. Thanks so much to Aaron for joining me today, and thank you for watching or listening. Check out every episode of Channel Insider Partner POV on channelinsider.com or watch on YouTube at channelinsider_news and trends. You can also listen to this episode and every episode as a podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss an episode. Once again, I'm Katie Bavoso, and I'll see you next time.